Hi, everyone. Welcome to Working Process. I'm here with Bisila Noha, and she's someone whose work I've admired for a while, ever since I first saw it at Body Vessel Clay a couple of years ago. So, really excited to be in conversation with her today. And I'll let you tell people, about a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Well, thanks, Gabrielle. Thanks for having me in your podcast. It's very exciting. So my name is Bisila Noha, and I was born and raised in Spain, and I am half Spanish, half from Equatorial Guinea. And I've lived in London for the last 10 years after having lived in different places in Europe, in the US, etc. And so, this conversation is focused mostly around my practice as a ceramicist, which is something I've been doing, let's say, officially since 2017, although I started when I moved to London. But then along with it, I am also involved in different projects that combine kind of like creativity and arts and social justice, from the London LGBTQ plus Centre in London, Design Can, which is a platform to make the design industry more inclusive and more diverse, and other organizations.
Yeah, I love it, and we definitely want to hear about all of that too. So my first question is just like, when or how did you first come to clay, and when or how, right, did you know that clay was a medium that you were really like committed to in your artistic practice?
Everything started when I moved to London. So one of the reasons why I wanted to come here was because I felt there was something in me that I needed to explore. Like, I didn't study arts at university. I studied translation, which is very creative but very different to working with my hands, etc. And when I came to London, a friend told me, "Well, I'm doing a pottery course, so maybe you will like it." And I just went to a session, and it was just a magical, like that moment of like touching the clay when I was sitting on the wheel, and how it grew in my hands. And the guy who was running the session kept yelling, being like, "You're clay, you're clay, you're clay." And so everything was a bit like, oh, it's overwhelming. And and then I just loved it in that moment. And since then, I started going to different evening courses, uh, and classes. And then at some point that I was stuck with the job that I had before, like an office 9 to 5, I decided to take some time off London. I quit the job. I got into a residency in Italy. Then I traveled to Madrid and then to Mexico. And then the truth is that then everything just happened. I never, I never consciously said, I wanna be a ceramicist full time, or this is like what I am gonna do now. I'm quitting this job and this is what I'm doing. I just left something behind. I went on a journey to explore, and things have just been growing naturally.
Yeah, I love that like kind of commitment to like being in the moment and letting the process be the process and seeing where it takes you, but also like, the intuitive wisdom and understanding that you had to access to be able to make right, to like take the pottery class, to move to London, to let things just flow. I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, like right now, maybe it looks like in hindsight, it looks very, yeah, you're saying beautiful or wise. So, but at the moment, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was so anxious when I quit my job and I left because I was like, oh, um, but everything has worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that saying, leap in the net will appear.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Um, I would love to hear more about your working process. So, when you're working on a piece or a collection, or yeah, just like what's your process of like communing with clay, coming to a work? Are you throwing? Are you hand building? Are you sketching? Are you just free flowing? Yeah, would love to hear about that.
It's changed dramatically in the last couple of years, and I feel like now it's changing again a lot. And so you mentioned sketching. Like, I can draw. I'm terrible at it. I just cannot. And at the beginning, I was trying to do it, but I would not connect with what I was drawing. It wasn't coming. It was coming, I think, from an intellectual place rather than from like within me, and that intuition we were talking before. And 2 years ago, I went randomly to this other artist's house, a Black woman here in London who invited me to see the first ceramic pieces she had ever made. She's a well-established multidisciplinary artist, but she had never used clay before. And when I saw what she had made, I was like, this is exactly what I need, like a very playful, um, naive to a degree way of dealing with clay. And I ran to my studio after I hang out with it, and I started just like in 3 minutes making something. And all of the things that I really wanted to make were coming up. So right now my process starts with those little sketches, actually, but that made out of clay, and they were on display on Body Vessel Clay. I don't know if you remember, out of porcelain. So I feel like when I want to embark on like a new project or evolve a shape or something that I've made already, I go back to these clay sketches. And at the moment now, I've been looking, for instance, a lot into like dance and choreography and textiles and like all of the movement from like clothing when dancing. And then when I sat, when I see and work with the clay, it comes up, 3 dimensionally. And then what I go is to like, I translate that into a bigger piece, which maybe is completely different, obviously, but the kind of like the core elements of, or like the very deep nature of what I'm trying to convey is still there.
Right.
So that's at the beginning, kind of at the beginning, and then at the moment I mix throwing and coiling, and that is very purposeful. Like I started doing this in 2020 because for me it's a way of bringing together two worlds, if we like. Like the throwing would be what is considered more advanced, more technical, like what men do, and like progress. And then hand building would be like what women traditionally in the global south, sitting on the floor in communities with the children all together would use. And therefore, that is what throughout our history has been ignored. So I mix them because I want to put them on the same level, because that's the way it is. It's just pottery, and there's different ways to approach it. And I quite like, I like throwing in what it brings to me as a process and the focus. And then I really like hand building and how it takes longer. It can be fixed in a way, and it's a more intimate way for me to work with the clay.
Yeah, I love that because when I first started working with clay, it was very similar. I took some nighttime pottery classes and I started on the wheel. And then I went on a residency to Oaxaca, Mexico, for a month. So I went to London to see Body Vessel Clay, and then I came home for a bit and I went to Oaxaca for a residency. And when I got back to my studio, it was like I couldn't throw anymore. There was just something, right? Like the muscle memory was still there, but none of the pieces were sort of making sense or coming out like what I saw in
Mm,
my head. And I had been so curious about hand building before I left on the trip for similar reasons to you, right? Like, I'm really interested in the African ceramics tradition, rooting my practice in those methods, and like ways of making, ways of being. And so I was like, I'm over this. I'm just going to coil build. And, it was like so intuitive, right? Which isn't to say that like my first coil built pot was amazing, but it's just to say that like it inherently made sense to me, I think, because it's like, within our DNA almost, I feel like, right? Like it's within our ancestry, it's within our heritage. And now I almost exclusively coil build, mostly just because I'm a
mm.
bit nervous to go back to the wheel. I'm not sure if how it's gonna work out. Um, so I definitely sort of relate to, the journey of like where you start and then kind of, building your practice and seeing what influences you and what you're drawn to from there and how that leads to the work that you're doing today.
Where were you in Oaxaca? Where
Um,
did you
I
go?
was I was at Poco a Poco. I did
Let's
their independent study. Yeah,
nice,
last April. Yeah, it was really really great.
amazing.
It was really great because you've also a part of your trip, right? Italy, Madrid. You also went to Mexico, Morocco,
Yeah, to
other places.
Oaxaca. Yeah, yeah, and I
Mm,
was in Oaxaca. Yeah, but I was
nice.
kind of like moving a bit more independently. I was volunteering for an organization called Innovando la Tradición, kind of like innovating traditions, and they work with different potters from the whole of Oaxaca. And so through them, I was translating for them and just doing bits and bobs. And then through them, I was visiting different local potters. So I would go to their houses and hang out and just see how they made. And yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. I would love to hear too, right? Because you mentioned that you studied translation in school. And I think a lot of what we do as artists, right? Whether it's like you said, you're looking at dance or textiles, movement, right? And then translating and transmuting that into clay. I would love to hear about, yeah, just like how you think about translation in relation to your practice, to your work.
This is actually something very new because I studied translation and I work as a translator for a bit, and then writing has always been in my life, and because I love it, but it has been in the last couple of years that it has become a very important part of my practice in the sense that because I'm developing more like conceptual projects where there's a lot of storytelling is a really big part of them. Writing is kind of like this the final piece of the puzzle, you know. And then through that, I've started talking again about my being a translator. So it's something that I wouldn't use before as part of my identity, if you like. But now it's coming back and I just love it because I think like for me, translation is like one of the most hidden, important, and beautiful creative practices that exist. And what I like and I love about translation, it is what has actually shaped my own the way I am and the way I see the world and the things that I'm interested in is that idea of learning a language is not just the words, it's about like diving into a culture, diving into a way of understanding society and relating to people and seeing the world. Um, so I feel like that's exactly what I do with my clay, like with my
Hmm.
practice. Like I
Yeah,
love traveling and seeing how people engage with clay and those histories and her stories and also what is the politics behind it, and how can I translate that into an object that then I can make other people see what I've
right.
seen or understand what I've understood and bring people together. So I feel like I really am maybe still a translator, but I'm just
Yeah.
using a different medium for it.
Definitely. Definitely. I think of it too as being like a conduit for, what wants to come through from, the spirit world or from family histories or from, the land that I'm on, right? And like taking that, translating it, transmuting that into clay. So you're
Yeah.
definitely still a translator. Um, I would love to hear as well about how you're right. We're talking about travel, we're talking about translation, we're kind of talking about land and these different things. How does your heritage, right, and where you're from? You're also now based in London. You also travel a lot. How does that impact your practice? And I'm thinking specifically about the Bonnie Clay
Funny.
project, the Bonnet Clay project.
Mm.
But of course, anything that you would want to share.
Yeah. So Banay is the village where my dad was from in Equatorial Guinea, and my parents brought me clay from there many years ago, and I never got around using it until 2020, I think it was, and I made this project that was the first main conceptual collection talking about identity and politics, etc. And one, it really changed my practice and it really changed how I approach it and what I really want to focus on and how I want to move forward in terms of my making and also how I make, because that was the first time that I was combining throwing and hand building and also different clays and foraging clays, etc. Um, but then also what I've realized this year is how instrumental that project was in terms of my own journey um, as a woman, because I talked about my being mixed race and how being in between those cultures and how that idea of mixing, which I always used in when I'm making, kind of like comes across. But the truth is that I went to Equatorial Guinea again in April. Right, like the first time I went was in 2010. It was the first time my dad was back after 30 years. We all went. It was our first time, and I think that trip was kind of overwhelming because it was a new place. I felt rather out of place. And it was this moment when I was like, okay, I'm in Spain and I'm not considered Spanish and I'm here, but I'm also not from here. And it's like, where am I from? Blah, blah, blah. Um, this second trip, after obviously like 10 years on, like I'm a grown up, a bit more of a grown up person, having done a lot of work around my own identity, my own blackness, and then in particular having worked the soil of that country, of my country, and having written about it and made work about it, I landed and I felt like I'm at home,
Mm.
and I have developed a beautiful relationship to this half of me from the distance through the clay.
Hmm.
And it was truly magical to be there after having done this project. So now I don't remember what your question was, but definitely.
Yeah, just
um,
just how does your heritage, how does where you're from,
yeah.
influence your practice?
Well, definitely, like one, like it influence. I feel like it's a two-way thing. Like it influenced what I was making, and now the making is influenced also my own sense
Mm,
of identity and belonging, and sense of self, and pride. About who I am and where I come from. And
yeah.
then I think also because I am half African and because I am a feminist person, a feminist woman, I have a very particular interest in what I want to talk about with my work. I want to give visibility to other women like me, other women of color who have been ignored throughout history, etc. So that's where it'll come from.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and then you also have been researching Equatorial Guinea ceramic traditions?
A little bit because when I was studying that project, the Banana Clay project, I wanted to make shapes that were like from there, kind of to celebrate that practice. But then I couldn't find anything. And when I was talking to people, people would be like, well, I don't even know what you mean by pottery. Um, so for that particular project, I started looking at other African countries, and like other making groups, yeah, tribes, etc. And then it was through this last, and I kind of like parked it. I was like, okay, well, nobody can help me really. Nobody knows about this thing. I cannot find anything. And then it was this trip again that one of my uncles was taking me to different cultural centers and like cultural spaces, etc. That I kind of like I saw that there is a pottery tradition. It's just that because the country has like islands and a bit on the continent, and we come from the main island, and there in particular, it seems that it might not be that much. I mean, I don't know. I need to read more. But then in other areas of the country, there is a tradition. So if I go beyond my own tribe and my own kind of like small village where I come from, then there is certainly is like a pottery tradition. Yeah.
Right, right. And is that because the soil is different on the island where your tribe is from as opposed to the soil or the land on the continent?
This is the conclusion I kind of like arrived to myself because there is a volcanic island, and so when I was using the clay on its own, it will crack. So that's why also I was mixing it with other clays and the concept of the project, etc. So it could be one of the reasons. The amazing thing is that since I started asking one of my uncles, like, do you know anything about pottery there? Blah blah, and he was like, no. But then going to the land, to our family land, where we call like pineapples and like like mangoes, etc. He had been finding objects that they had been throwing away because they thought it was rubbish. And then since I told them, they have been keeping them like maybe this is pottery. So then they gave me some pieces when I was there last, and then with someone in my studio who is an archaeologist, we're gonna analyze it and see if it's actually ceramics, and then we can actually see like from which time, etc. So
Wow, that's
that's
really
yeah,
exciting.
yeah, it is, yeah.
That's really exciting. And I'm so jealous that there's someone at your studio that's an archaeologist who can like
I know.
time date this for you. That's amazing.
I know, and it was because I posted it. I didn't think of him, and I posted it on Instagram. Like, if anyone can help me with this, please let me know. And someone else from my studio was like, "Tell Sacher," and I was like, "Oh my God, Sacher!" It's just yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really amazing. This project also led you into your searching for Kwame Kaka project, right?
Yeah,
And sort of,
yeah.
I don't want to say started, right? But I'm thinking, I'm just wondering about, right, like who are your sisters, mothers, and grandmothers in clay, and right, like you know, you talk about wanting to give attention to the women who have been ignored. And so just like, how do you think about your relationship, right, to the women who worked with clay before you, who are working with clay today, and also, you know, who will continue to work with clay all over the world, you know, for millennia to come.
Yeah. Yeah, it all started with that one because when I was looking at shapes for the project and I couldn't find anything from Equatorial Guinea, and so I was looking at other places and I was looking at it like very superficially because I wanted shapes that would tell a story. That's why I chose kind of like I call them womb, because the idea of like clay as creator and women bodies as creators. So but it would be a munjar in essence. And then when I was going through images on online, Pinterest, whatever, like going through books, then I saw this two-legged vessel, and I was like, well, this is perfect. This is my two halves coming together, and that was it. I kind of like quote unquote used the shape. And then it was afterwards when I was looking at it again to kind of like revisit it and be like, how can I evolve this project? That's when I realized that the photo I had seen was from Sotheby's website, where he said that the piece had been sold. There was a name, Ivory Coast, but then there was no information about her. And then I couldn't find any information about her. And that's when I was like, okay, so this is like what's happening here. Like
Yeah.
this work has been sold, someone has made money out of it, but the person, the story, and this life has been discarded. So that's when I started trying to find out more information about her, and I found a little bit. The amazing thing is that I got a grant to travel to Ivory Coast. So I'm organizing a trip to go to her village, to talk to people
Oh,
there, to
yay.
visit hopefully other pottery communities around the country, and yeah, and then hopefully turn into a book, blah blah. I mean, it's all at the very
Yeah.
beginning of it, but I'm really really excited because this is actually what I really want to do with my practice. Like combining all of what we were saying, like more the traveling, the research, the women, her stories that have been lost, and then doing something with it.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Congratulations on getting the
Thanks.
grant. I love how you're merging, you know, research with clay, with writing, you know, with all of these, right? It's really giving multidisciplinary, which is so beautiful, and just the, you know, the intention, right, that you're putting into into your into your work.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, you're definitely welcome. I would also, right, so I first encountered your work at Body Vessel Clay. And would just love to hear, you know, what was it like being in that exhibition? Any, you know, thoughts, reflections, right? That was about a year ago. So just, you know, in the year since, right? Like, what has it meant to you to have been a part of that?
I mean, that exhibition is the best thing that has happened to me, I think. Um, the whole process was kind of like terrifying in a way, very exciting because I was invited to be part of it, and then I was told by Dr. Jared, as the curator, like you're gonna be in a room with Madaleno Dundo and Ladi Kwali, so you are kind of like the hinge, like the joining between the tradition and today. So what are you gonna make? And I was like, all right, that's quite like a big
Right? Like,
break.
no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole process of making and also the conversations with the curator, that was something that I hadn't done before. I felt a huge sense of responsibility of having to make something that would be at the level of these two other women, that two of my idols, and
Right.
I was sharing space with them, so I feel I had to be at the level. Um, and then the whole thing, it was just mind blowing, from the space, actually the venue,
Mm-hmm.
how it was used, and coming in and seeing that big image of
Yes.
Ladi Kwali welcoming
Yes.
everyone, and I'm getting goosebumps, like it's so powerful. And then yeah, like being in that room with their work, like Madeleine Odundo's and Ladi Kwale's. And it really changed the perception I have of myself. Like I think I started then seeing myself as an artist. You know, it was the first time my work was being exhibited in a non-craft space, you know, part of a narrative, along with also, I mean, in the contemporary side, like some of women that I've admired like for a
Right,
really long
right.
time. You know, I really feel like, how have I landed here? You know, like so chuffed to be in that space. And it was also like a really big encouragement, like to continue doing what
Hmm.
I was doing. So I have like the best memories from that exhibition, and I really miss it. Like sometimes I think about it, and I'm like, I wish we could see that exhibition again, or that I could see it
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah. I just, remember walking in and being so right, that similar sense of feeling welcomed by the massive image of Lottie Kwali, but then um, just seeing the different pamphlets and all of the different vessels, and for me, I was at that point um, almost a year into my clay journey when I went to go see that exhibition, and I was just like, the studio that I've been working out of, it's not necessarily the most diverse space. And so I had been looking for us, right? Looking for Black women in the medium. And I was like, oh, okay, it's here. And like, right, I knew that it was here. I knew that it
Mhm.
existed, but it was just such a, I was like, I want to study all of these, women. I want to have conversations with them. I want to learn more about this tradition. And I think it was just such a gift that we were all given um, to have that exhibition and everything that was surrounding it. It really made me feel like, yeah, there's a space, there's a tradition, like, this has been happening and it will continue to happen, and like there's a place for you um, here.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I think for us, definitely, and I think for the history of British ceramics, such an important moment as well in general.
Yeah. Um, I kind of want to circle back because I'm curious. We talked a lot about how your blackness, your Africanness, your dad's side influences your pottery and your practice. I'm curious how being Spanish as well shows up in your work.
Hmm. I think it was showing more at the beginning. The very first projects that I was doing at the beginning were more around this. So from one that I was using a lot of needlework and combining it with clay, and it was kind of like these two Spanish traditions, let's say, like from like needlework and pottery that both are being forgotten, you know, and young people don't want to engage with them because it's old fashioned and it's ugly and that's my grandma's kind of thing. So by bringing them together and creating something more contemporary, I wanted to make them still relevant. And then I was also looking at another project at the botijo, which is like Mediterranean drinking vessel, like from like it's like from an empire, possibly, I don't know. And again, it's this thing where uh, is used mostly in summer because the clay is porous, you put water and it keeps it cool. So thinking about those ideas of sustainability, etc., you know, and all of this progress, but we have this object that is functionally incredible, but then because it's ugly, no one uses it. So I was trying to kind of like rethink the design. But I feel like that for me, the miss I've always been because how can I say this? Being brown, being a woman of color in a white environment, what I needed to search, what I needed to embrace, what I needed to um, celebrate was that blackness, you know. So I think that that is how things have come up with my making because through also my own journey to embrace my own being a woman, you know, and the power of it and all of it, then I discovered black feminism, and then that's how things have evolved. And right now through like another separate journey that my sister and I are together to connect with our ancestors on both sides. We're connecting more with my mother's side. So I don't know how that will evolve, you know, but I feel like for me, the first step was that, I'm obviously not white, and
Right.
it's something that I grew up thinking that I was white, but because I was surrounded by white people, and it was when I was at uni that someone was like, "Stop straightening your hair, you are black," and I was like, "What is she saying? Is she talking to me?" Like this kind of thing. Um, so that's how I've evolved, and my work has come with it. My work has enabled it, and then as I continue growing, because there's so many questions marks, really, always to kind of give answer to. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned Black feminism, and I know that Alice Walker's "In Search of Our Mother's Gardens" was a part of the Searching for Kwame Kaka project, but would love to sort of just hear about like how Black feminism has influenced your growth as a person, your work, and also, if you have any kind of like foundational or like sacred, Black feminist text like books that you're
Mm.
always referencing and coming back to.
Well, the very first one I read, and it was in 2016, was Angela Davis. What is it? Black Women, Race and Class. Is
Mhm,
that the
women, race,
title?
class. Yeah.
Women, Race, Class. Uh, and I feel like because I was in feminist circles, always being the only non-white person, that I read that book and I felt like a bit like what you were feeling or you felt when you went to Body Vessel Clay. I was like, okay, there's more to it, and this is my experience and I can relate to all of these things. And that's when everything started from me. In terms of other books, things that I've read actually recently that have been really impactful is from um, Audre Lorde's her biography, like Sammy, that's not the spelling of my name. That I love that book also because as someone interested in words, like Audre Lorde's like writing and like her
Yes.
poems, like everything is just fantastic. And this year I've committed to mostly read biographies. So I recently read the biography of Asata Sakur,
Mhm.
who was one of the founders of the Black Liberation Movement, Black Panther, and it might not be related, but it's this kind of like stories that fill me with power, and pride, and be like, we're here for something, and we have all of these people coming, all of these women, all of these generations, all of this energy behind us, and
Yeah.
that is what I carry, and so this in terms of things that I've read recently, and now I kind of think anything from before because I'm always reading something, but it's just like finding it's been instrumental in finding the community, like even if it's intangible, um and being feeling entitled to feel powerful, I think,
Mm.
and feeling
Mm.
that there's a story, like there's a heritage, and I'm
Yeah.
part of it, and also the fact that the feminist movement has been pushed by like women of color. It's just like we've been told that we are on the sidelines. We've been not allowed to be in there, but actually we've been pushing for all of these things
Yeah.
historically, always. From Sojourner Truth, like
I
I'm
was just
I
going to
am a
say
woman.
that. I
Yeah,
was just
exactly.
going to say that. I was just going to say that.
So it's
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah. I love that, right? Like black feminism as giving us permission or right the ability to feel entitled to feeling powerful. If that's not like the best kind of like tagline, right, that you could give it, I don't know. I don't know, what is. And I love what you said too about it helping you feel less alone, right? Like these are books, like unfortunately, like Audre Lorde's passed away. We'll never get to meet her, right? But like we can engage with her through her words, which is just like
Mm,
such a gift. I'm also a writer, and so yeah, I don't have some neat bow for that, right? But like I just think that it's a really, really beautiful thing.
mm, I agree.
Um, Kind of like, starting to sort of wrap up, but I'm so enjoying this conversation. I'm wondering just like what has your clay practice taught you about, yourself, about life, about art? We've kind of been talking about this the whole time, but um yeah.
So many things. From I used to be very clumsy, and I still am clumsy, but I'm just learning to be like more gentle, and careful, and also being patient. And because, it takes time, and then also things break, things don't work out, and that is life, I'm being like, okay, so I'll make this again, and it is okay. Um, Definitely very helpful in that sense. And then what I've learned, not necessarily just the making, but the pure acts of starting something of my own that is very personal, like my own projects. I used to be very competitive, and that came from a sense of insecurity because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I hadn't found my own voice, my own niche, however you want to call it. And in that competitiveness and feeling kind of like precious about what I was doing and jealous, that made me not kind of like connect to people properly or deeply. And the moment it was actually like through therapy, but obviously I like via the clay and what I was engaging with, that I was like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my energy, I'm wasting my time. And then in the last, I don't know, 4 years or so, that I've grown to know what I'm about, and even if someone that's exactly the same is never going to be the same, it doesn't matter. We're different people, we have different energies, and learning from that place to share, to be generous, with other artists, with other practitioners. And then like I've developed like the most beautiful friendships, and like a support network through that. So that has been a really, really big learning. Um, and then in general, it's just the power of art, to engage with people. Like the thing I love the most about pottery in particular is that is, I always say this, is has been with humans since forever, millennia. We all share it. And me going to Mexico, and hanging out with women in Oaxaca that I don't have kind of like a priori like anything to do with, but then we share this,
Yeah.
because we are just basic human beings, And when we were in Morocco and we couldn't speak Arabic, but we were sitting with that woman, with Mama Isha, and we were talking through the clay. And it's just that humbleness as human beings that we lack generally, and that awareness of our shared humanity. That's something very beautiful that pottery has taught me.
Yeah. Um, is there anything, I mean, you mentioned therapy, but how did you sort of come around to, right? Like what your voice is and, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to say, and there's room for all of us.
Well, I think it's just kind of listening in, like going inwards. In 2020, I felt that what I needed to make was something in particular, and I did it, and then that led to something else. And I was like, I really need to do this, and I did it. And I think it's like following that path rather than what we are seeing around us that other people are seeing, and kind of like pursuing someone else's success or perceived success, because we only see what we see. We don't see beyond what is portrayed out there on Instagram or whatever. So I think it's also understanding that it's ever evolving. I am at the moment right now that I'm trying to make something new, something different, with 1,000 influences of all of the things that I've seen, and I'm like, I don't know. It feels like it's back to a square one, obviously with a lot of like baggage and experience and everything, but it's it is over and over and over and over and over
Yeah.
again. Um, and it goes back to, for me, that what I was saying, like sitting with the clay and making something really quickly. What is coming out of me? If I close my eyes and if I just feel it beyond what I'm seeing that another 20 people are making and they're selling. So I think it's like it's always a constant evolution, and it's about just looking inwards and being truthful to that
Yeah.
authenticity.
Yeah. Um, so we've kind of, right, we just touched on this, like clay, ceramics. It's a medium that has this real longevity. And like, the vessels, the objects that we're making can last for centuries, for millennia, for
Mm.
forever. And so I'm, wondering, right? Like when someone, pulls up a vessel from somewhere thousands of years from now and it has your name on the bottom, right? Like what do you hope? Um, what do you hope to leave behind?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I hope they like it. I hope like when they touch it, it feels wholesome somehow, and I hope they can engage with it somehow. And obviously, if the internet is still existing, that they can find my name and they can engage
Right,
with the
right.
stories,
Yeah.
so they can understand what the object is about. But because that we don't know if that may happen or not, I feel like if someone, when you touch something made out of clay and it just feels nice, the way it kind of like it fits with the body. I love holding my clothes like as if they were babies, and no, so if someone feels that, then that would be amazing.
Yeah. Um, what forms do you want your practice to take moving forward, right? I know that you've been integrating plaster on pieces, you're working with bronze, you also, are a writer, you're an art activist, you talked about this grant project. Like, yeah, what are you looking forward to? What forms do you want your work to take?
Um, I would love to be able to play with a range of materials. I would love to one day play with stone. I don't know. I would like to, in my head, I would love to be that kind of artist that works with a range of materials and integrates them and blends from kind of like the different properties that they have and brings them into the other and etc. And there's always that element of play and curiosity. Um, and definitely I for me, like I want my writing and all of that research part of it to be really important, and sometimes I say like I have the feeling inside that I'm not going to be making forever. I know that it is going to be part of what I do, but that it might change, and maybe
Yeah.
it's changing in that direction. I don't know. It's always going to be present. I just don't know how. Uh, right now, I would love it if it was, yeah, through writing, research, documentary kind of like thing, and traveling. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like this grant that you got is the perfect, it came along at a
Yes.
perfect time to do all of that.
Yes. Yes.
So a couple more like lighthearted, fun questions. What's your favorite clay body, your favorite glaze, and then your favorite tool? And then I have one
Okay.
more.
So my favorite clay body, I would say terracotta right now. My favorite glaze, none. I don't like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've stopped using them like some
Do
years
you
ago.
do you do any like sealing or anything though? Or okay.
I was gonna say my favorite tool is a stone that I got from Mama Isha in Morocco when I was there because we learned
Hmm.
to burnish with
Right.
stones, and so I
Right.
brought some with me. And this one that I use is good for coiling to kind of like finish the coils, but then also for burnishing. And yeah, yeah.
But do you do any sealing with like terra sigillata or like sesame oil or anything? No. Okay. I
No, just
love
the clay.
Yeah, I love that. And then what are you like reading, listening to, watching, or enjoying right now outside of your clay slash studio practice?
So, reading, I'm doing a creative nonfiction writing course, and right now I'm reading this book that is fascinating. It's called A Ghost in the Throat, and it's about a woman, like an Irish woman, who starts. I mean, it shouldn't be related to pottery, but it is. But anyway, she's
No, no, it's
researching.
fine. It's fine. Anything you want to share.
So she's researching an Irish poet from the 18th century. So this is her and like the writer alive, having children and I don't know, being a mom, blah blah. And then at the same time getting so obsessed with this poet and trying to find out as much as possible about her life. Yeah, and then the other thing that I'm doing right now is I'm training for a triathlon.
Oh,
So
fun.
that's it is actually however terrifying, it's also, I think it's giving me a lot of energy and a sense of purpose that all of the other things that I do don't give me, and feeling very well in my own body, and just, yeah, I'm feeling
Yeah.
pretty great thanks to it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm not trying for any triathlons, but I do try and go for my hot girl walks at least a few times a
Nice.
week. Got to get outside. Is there any well tell everybody like where they can find you and if there's anything you have like coming up that you want to share. Um yeah, this is your like shout out moment.
So they can find me on Instagram if they look for Bisila Noha. And then my website is bisilanoha.co.uk. And at the moment, I have an exhibition in Bordeaux, a Gallery Rebel. And it's a group exhibition. It's a very exciting one because it's about how a bunch of artists were approaching materials and the politics of it and gender and all of these things that I love. So yeah, that will be it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation and look forward to, just seeing how your practice continues to grow and change in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it as well.